it's my turn today. I'm not sure how it happened, actually.
You volunteered?
I guess I volunteered. I don't know. Okay, I guess I did. And that's all right. And I'm going to be all super, like, 21st century. These are my notes. I'm not reading my text. They're my notes. And I was trying to be all safe paper about things, except now I'm kind of thinking maybe that wasn't my best idea. But
I
want to put it on something so I can see it.
There you go.
Thank you very much. That's what you get for trying to be cool when you're not really cool. Fake cool. All right.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah, right. Okay, so the starting point today was this poster that we've had at the back of church since we started putting the posters up at the back of church, which was, I can't remember when, June maybe?
Yeah.
Was it June?
Maybe July.
This one was different. Kind of set apart from the others. It didn't really have a question that was about how you see St. Mary's or where do you see us going or what ideas that you might have. The idea behind this particular poster that some people contributed to was to write down something that no one knows about you without putting your name on it. So to sort of, give a little teaser maybe, or just give something about you that maybe people didn't know before. So the way that happened was because on the day that the posters were being set up, it wasn't planned ahead of time. The way that the day the posters were being set up, I think Richard was there and Nick was there, and then Richard had to leave, and Nick was there going, what should I do with all these posters? And then Richard said, well, Sally's here and she's good, so ask her. So is that a fair summary of how it went?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very accurate.
Pretty accurate. So it was actually Sally's idea, and she felt. I'm sorry she's not here today, actually. She was going to try, but her parents just came in on Thursday, so and I think her dad was very tired after a day at the arena yesterday watching the kids play ringette. But I'm sorry she's not here, because she would have filled it in for you what her idea was behind that. And she was a little bit like, felt a little awkward that it went up there and it was kind of her thing, but it didn't ever really get explained. And so her idea behind it, why she thought it would be a good idea, was it was one of the ways she always would start with her new business, her teams when she was working. She used to work for Pfizer?
No, the other one, Merck.
The other one?
Merck.
Whatever, one of the pharmaceuticals. Anyway, and they were in sales, and she would work with her teams, and they would have days away and motivating and whatever. And it was just one of the icebreakers that she would use to get people to share a little bit about who they were and make it a bit of a game at the same time. Make it sort of a safe way to start to open up a little bit about who you are, because as in business, as in life, the best way to come together as a team and to work together and to cooperate is to know at least a little bit about each other's stories. So that was kind of the idea behind this. So there's several of them. I don't know if anyone has had a chance to read them, or it may have been a while because it's been down for a while. So I'll just read you some of them here. One of them says, my middle name is Peter. Another one, once a townshipper, always a townshipper. Another, played Toto in The Wizard of Oz when I was 7. Graham, was that you? No, just kidding. I was in my high school choir for 6 years and head of choir last 2 years. I really would like to know who that is. I was the poster girl for a gun club. I like to cuddle with my lizard. I played the Sugar Plum Fairy in the ballet. And what denomination was I ordained in? So one of the things that we did before the first town hall early in September was Richard and I were tasked with taking all the posters and kind of putting them together and pulling out the themes and kind of deciding, okay, what was really being said on these posters. And that sort of summary of what we saw and put together was presented at the town hall. We made notes and whatever. But this one we kind of left out because it wasn't really part of the program, but we didn't want it to just be forgotten. Left out, but not forever. And so that was kind of the starting point for this morning. Interestingly, there's really only one, but probably two, that I can identify. Walter, this is you. Yes?
Are you sure?
I think so. Am I right or wrong?
Am I guilty as charged?
Am I right or wrong?
You're correct.
I'm correct. So I know about Walter, that he was
ordained in the Southern Baptist.
In the Southern Baptist Church. And maybe not everybody knows that about Walter, but I do because I've known Walter for a long time. We've chatted over the years. I'm also wondering if maybe lizard could be replaced with gecko. I don't know if that's...
It's not actually.
It's not actually. So that's awesome. Because, no, really, because it kind of makes my point. When I read all of these things, I really was only for sure about Walter. That was the only one I was for sure about. All the rest of them, I was like, what? I don't know. And it really struck me because I've been here for a really long time. Like, really long. Like, there aren't even that many people anymore who have been here longer than me. Like, that's a long time. Okay, some of you, yes, but nonetheless, since 15 to where I am now, what's that? Almost 30 years. So I've been here almost 30 years. So unless you've been here almost 30 years, anyway, and I thought, wow, there are all these people who are obviously involved enough in the parish to be willing to put something up on a board. So we're not talking about outliers, right? We're talking about people who are involved and people who are interested and people who are contributing. And I can only identify one person's story on that board. And that really shocked me. And it was part of what was certainly not the inspiration, but part of why, for me anyways, in my thought process, why we did the Telling Our Stories theme that we've been doing for the last month and a half or so, which you may or may not have spotted. I don't know how clear it was that was our theme, but we heard Jackie's story of her trip in Peru. We heard Nick's story of kind of his outline of how he came to faith and his background a little bit and how he ended up as an Anglican minister. We heard some story from Richard along a different line in terms of his experience just setting up the worship space here in a new way and kind of explaining where that came from and why that was there. And in some ways, last week we heard Savannah's story. In some ways, we didn't kind of label it that way, but in fact we were living her story in a really neat way. So that's been our theme for the last bunch of weeks. And I guess we're thinking about kind of wrapping that up, even though you never really wrap that up. In terms of telling stories, Jesus told stories, that's what he did. He told stories and he listened to stories. But we were thinking we need to focus on something new, and so how do we wrap it up? So that's what the idea is here today. So that's the what of today. The what is these stories that we don't actually know, and how we've spent the last few weeks telling stories or hearing some of our stories. And so what? So what is that all about? Why does it matter? Why is it important? In the summer when I did a little talk, I talked about a teacher that I know. His name is Huntley Addy. He's an English teacher at John Rennie. And he came during camp and did the leader group with the teenagers after camp, which we did every day except for the Friday. And he's awesome in lots of ways. I'm not going to retell all my stories about Huntley. But one of the things that I learned from him in the summer was that framework. The framework of what, so what, and now what. And how he uses that a lot when he's teaching with the teenagers. That you talk about the what, okay, what's on the table here? And then so what? Why is it on the table? Who cares anyway? And then when you decide that it cares, that you care, if it does, or that it matters, if it does, then you say, well, now what? So here's the what. As I say, the what is our stories. The fact that there was only one that I could identify was really striking to me, and tells me that as much as we think we know people's stories, often we don't, or often there's a lot more to the story than we might have thought, and that's important to remember. So what? Here's something else that I've used before. I'm going to move some of these post-it notes. I've talked about Huntley before. I've talked about stories before, for sure. I've also talked about Brene Brown before. I don't know if you guys would remember that either. It's all important to me, but maybe it doesn't stick with you quite as hard. But quite a while ago when I did a talk, it sounds like I do them all the time and I don't, right? But anyways, quite a while ago when I did one, as my starting point, I used a video of Brene Brown on TED Talks, if you're familiar with TED Talks, and if you're not and you're online, check it out. Brene Brown is brilliant. She calls herself a research storyteller. And she has a whole story and a whole history. I won't give it all now, otherwise we'll be here. I always end up talking for too long, so I'm not going to give you the whole history and story. But she's amazing, and she studies really interesting topics like vulnerability, shame, how people rise strong after falling or having the floor taken out from under them. All of her work is very research-based, but she makes it qualitative as opposed to quantitative and presents it in a way that is really amazing. And about, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe, she did this talk on what's called TED Talks, and it's got 35 million views. And she talks about vulnerability and connection and how those things work together in the story of us, of all of us. I haven't talked about her since then, but as it happens, here I am doing another talk, and she's come out with a new book. It's like the new one since several years, but I've been reading it this fall. And there's just a phrase from it that I wanted to use today in the so what portion of why, like, so what? We have all these stories, some of them we know, some of them we don't, so what? This is the phrase, and I'm going to write it because I'm a good teacher. I use my Sharpies and my Bristol boards. The phrase is, people are hard to, and I'm going to leave it blank here, and I'll explain why in a second. She doesn't leave it blank. Close up. People are hard to blank, close up, move in. In the book, the word that she has here is hate. People are hard to hate, close up, move in. And part of what she talks about, she's American, so part of what she talks about is the political scene and how a lot of that has been tearing families apart, tearing relationships apart, and how people are separating into groups, and whether it's straight up name calling or glorified name calling, just all that tension and stuff that's been there. But she also links it and brings it back down into the individual and community level, and uses this phrase for all of it, that people are hard to hate, close up, move in. There are other words that we could put there. We could say people are hard to dismiss, close up, so move in. People are hard to judge, close up, so move in. People are hard to, what it boils down to, I don't know if you have other ideas right away of other words that could be put in there. Any word that you put there, hate, judge, dismiss, use, any of those words, you could really kind of lump them together and say objectify. People are hard to objectify, close up, so move in. And that's the so what of why these stories are important. Maybe particularly at this time at St. Mary's, where we're kind of deciding who we're going to be and what we're going to be, where we're going to be it. Working as a team and as a community is highlighted in terms of importance, but really it's the #1 priority all the time. How we are together in church, in our church community, in our families, in all of our relationships outside of church as well. To get all fancy biblical about it, that's the new commandment, right? To love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the primary. Anybody who wants to know what's the meaning of life, there it is. Learning how to love ourselves, each other, and God. And so that's a big so what. That's a big answer to the question, so what? Why are our stories important? Why is it important to know who played the Wizard of Oz when they were 7? And what that meant to them, that it meant enough to them, I don't know if the person's even here, you don't have to identify yourself, but it meant enough to them that they put it up there. And even if it was something a little bit funny or a little bit unexpected, we all have about a million billion things that we could pull out that are a little bit funny and a little bit unexpected, but that's the one that person chose. So why? Why did they choose that? Why is that important to them? And as soon as you do that, you're moving in and you're getting closer up. And someone that you didn't know before, you're going to know better. And when you have to answer big questions like, who are we as a church community, you're better able to address that question and to find answers. Excellent. I was worried about not being biblical enough because I was pretty sure Artie was going to record me, and that Nick was going to listen to it at some point. Hi, Nick. So I was like, I better talk about the Bible. It's not hard to do. I mean, I just did. I just used the New Commandment, and that was not just for Nick. But I was thinking about it, because you do. And I was thinking, really, that's what the first story that jumped to mind, because we're talking about stories, the first story that jumped to mind to illustrate that from a biblical perspective was Mary Magdalene. When you look at that story of when she was being persecuted, we assume it was Mary Magdalene, but anyway, being persecuted as an adulteress, and how he stopped it all in its tracks and made the persecutors think, well, what's your story actually? And when they went away to think about their story, then he waited and stopped to hear hers. And to me, that's it again. In a nutshell, is relating to people means moving in, and moving in means hearing their stories. I'm a broken record, but that's what it is at the end of the day. Checking my notes on my lovely phone over here. Okay, good. I'm on track. I just had a little story to tell, also just to illustrate the point maybe a little bit further. On Friday, talked about Huntley before, this teacher from John Rennie, English teacher. I subbed for him at John Rennie on Friday. And so I was teaching grade 9, 10, and 11 English and ethics, which was very exciting and very cool to be in high school and to be at John Rennie, where I went to school and graduated 25 years ago. Just saying. In the spring, it'll be 25 years. I went and found my face on the wall. It's still there. Anyways, so we were doing these classes. And interestingly, because it's Huntley, the topic of the week was not where do you put your commas. The topic of the week was this phenomenon that's been going around on the internet, on Facebook and so on, the hashtag #MeToo. So some of you are nodding right away, so you know what that is. But for those of you who aren't aware, the hashtag #MeToo came from, there was this news story that came out, a woman that spoke out about having been sexually assaulted, or I can't remember the whole story. Do you remember the whole story? Harassed. Sexually harassed. Okay, by a big name, Weinstein, Harry Weinstein, and she spoke about it. And I'll cut the long, all the details short. But it became a thing on social media to do a hashtag #MeToo, and just thousands and even millions of people have posted that to represent A, their support for this woman, and also B, their resonance with the experience. So what it has kind of sparked is this big discussion and this big dialogue about sexual harassment, sexual assault, how often it happens, where it happens, when it happens. And so what? Everybody's putting hashtag #MeToo. So Huntley, of course, takes this and he's talking about it in his classes because the kids this is what they're talking about. So it was really neat for me to walk into that. They'd had their discussions already through the week, and so it was kind of a bit of a wrap-up on Friday in some ways. And walking into that was really, really interesting. And there was this one girl who came in. You can't hear everybody's story on the first day. That's true. But there was one girl who walked in, and you try to hear as many stories as you can, literally and figuratively. And she came and she sat down, and she was beautiful. She was just this lovely girl, and she had this awesome hair and lovely black dress that was just fantastic, so good. And I was just like, wow. Like, you have got it going on, girl. Like, this is it. If I were cool, that's how I would want to look, And so we talked a little bit as people were coming in and before class, and then we had this big discussion about the #MeToo, and the kids were talking about how they experience it. Some of them were telling their stories. Certainly not all of them, but some of them were. There was the girl that said, whenever I walk down this 42 hallway, my ass gets touched at least twice, purposefully. And how that affects her and affects her day, and what it says about the culture and what's acceptable, in quotes. Anyway, so we had this big discussion, and then at the end of the class, people were leaving, and just like at a conference, there's always a couple that wait and they talk to the person who was there, whatever. So a couple of people were there, and this girl in this great dress waited, and she spoke to me, and she said, you know, we talk about it, and we talk about how, because it was team teaching with another teacher also that Huntley teaches with, and he was talking about some of the dangers and the things that girls have to be aware of when you go to a club or when you do whatever, and talking about some of that stuff too, the dangers you have to look out for to protect yourself. And she said, you know, we're learning all of this and how to stand up for ourselves and how to stay safe and how to, you know, not let people cross the boundaries they shouldn't cross. But she said, like, she's 15, okay? But she says, what does that do to vulnerability and trust, and how am I ever going to build a relationship? Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. And I'm going to write her a letter. What I did was, because the next class was coming in and she had to go and what I did was, I said, do you have a phone? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay. And I took the phone and I loaded up on her Safari or whatever, her internet, the Brene Brown talk about vulnerability and connection. And I said, watch this. I said, this is the beginning of an answer to what you're asking. But I want to write her a letter. I want to say, you know, I throw that at you, and I don't know if you got to watch it, but here's what it means to me and why I thought it might be useful for you. And there's a stereotype about teenagers, and there's a stereotype about walking into a high school classroom, and I have felt it just since Friday, telling people, oh yeah, I was at John Rennie on Friday, you know, first time I've done high school in years. And go, whoa, that must have been fun, and you know, and it's like, actually no. Actually, if you move in and you talk to teenagers as if they're people, because they are, that objectification, people are hard to dismiss, judge, stereotype when you're close up. So move in becomes very real, and right away. As soon as you do that, I guess the so what answer for me is, as soon as you do that, as you move in, you make significance and connection where there wasn't before. So that's why it matters. So this is the what, and that's the so what. That's why it matters. So now what? How's my time? We have none, but that's okay. This is normal. I go on for too long, but that's okay. So. Now what? We have to do the now what, otherwise it's not complete. You can give kids a what, you can give them a so what, but if you don't give them a path, then where do they go with it? That's what Samantha was saying. She was saying, so now what? Where do I go with all of that? So what does it mean to us here and where we're at? How do we move in? How do we move in towards each other? And how do we move in towards God? Which is a harder question to answer in some ways. Both are scary, both are difficult. Somehow with how do you move in to other people, even if it's hard, it feels more tangible. I could say to you, I could give you homework, because I'm a teacher, and I could say, you know, move into someone this week that you've never moved into before, or maybe that you haven't moved in with in a while, or that you realize you'd like to move in with, or you think that they might need someone to offer a moving in situation, which would be a great idea, I think. I think that's a great now what. Whether it's somebody within our own community that you feel like, you know, we're having, whether it's about St. Mary's in its process kind of in a larger scale, someone that you think you need to move in with to kind of get on the same page with, or just hear what their page is. Or maybe it's move in with someone that you've been thinking about and maybe even praying for and caring about, but don't really know how they are. 5 minutes? Awesome. It could be anyone. It could be somebody at work. It could be somebody at home. But that's an easy now what. Well, it's not an easy now what, but it's a straightforward and tangible now what. And you can do that. What we can also do as a now what is participate in that kind of conversation. Doesn't mean you have to put a post-it note on my poster later. But when those opportunities are there, when we're together, when the invitation is there to share a little bit of yourself, is as important as being ready and open and willing to listen to somebody else. It's how the synergy works. And if that idea of giving something of yourself, whether it's a post-it note or a bit of a story, if that idea makes you say, yeah, no way, not me, maybe it's worth asking yourself why. And considering that if you were to open it up a little bit, just a bit, you know, I was Toto in The Wizard of Oz when I was 7. It's small, but you might discover that there's both a lot more in it for you than you might have thought, and a lot in it for everybody else as well. So that's the now what, community-wise, and the last now what for me, anyways, is how do you move in with God? So God is hard to what? Hate, dismiss, ignore, forget about, plead with, beg. I don't know. It's hard to dismiss. Let's say. Let's use that one just to finish the sentence. When you're close up. So move in. So how do you move into God? I don't have as much of an answer to that as I might have to the question, how do we move in with each other? Even though it's a much more complex question, moving in with each other, than I've been able to give attention to here right now. It's a harder one, how do you move in with God? And I just throw this out there because it's just something that's been on my mind. And so maybe somebody's going to say, here's how I can respond to that. I don't even know what you might respond. But just for the past several months, I've been thinking about meditation and mindfulness and how that's a big trend in society for sure. I'm sure you've heard all the talk about it. But meditation is not new. This is not a trend that's new. And there's nothing new under the sun. It's been around since forever. But it's not really something I've ever participated in. And to think that I've just been thinking, questioning meditation versus prayer, and is there a real difference, or what qualifies meditation as meditation, and how do you do that? I feel like my intuition is that it's a way to move into God, but I don't know how to do it, which is why I'm just the piano player and not, you know, the person with the collar or whatever. But I just throw it out there. And say that maybe that's one way of moving in. And certainly moving into God involves how we are together on a Sunday morning, and involves making all the decisions and choices that, for example, you know, Richard and I and others have been trying to make in terms of, well, where do we sit, and how does that help us move in or not? What music do I play, and how does that help us move in to God or not? What prayers should we say, and how does that help us move into God or not? So at the very least, although I don't have the answers necessarily to how to move in, particularly with God, for sure, hopefully I've been able to remind everyone to ask those questions. And it's helped me to remind me to ask all those questions. Because it's easy, God is easy to kind of dismiss or forget about or ignore unless you're close up. So let's move in together.
Amen.
Mary, we love you.
Thank you. That's going to lead us.
Dear God, help us to move in with each other, to hear each other's stories and get right close up, to see who's standing across from us, and to not try to dismiss them or judge them. Help us to move in with you as well, whatever way we might find as a community or as an individual, but to see who you are and maybe hear your stories as well. Not to shy away from sharing our own stories. And thank you that we can gather here together as a community to worship. That whatever happens in our lives or in the world, whatever changes we are going through, we can come back to this community and feel at home. That we can share our stories with each other. And that we get to continually discover new things about each other as well. Thank you that our life experiences and hearing about other people's experiences continually enrich our faith relationship with you. And help us grow our trust and love in each other and in you as we gather together to worship and to further your kingdom. Help us to continue to share those things with each other. Help us to show up when it's not always easy or fits nicely into our schedule. Help us to show up with our whole heart and our whole spirit. And as this community at St. Mary's is facing changes itself, help us to continue relying on each other to move forward together. Help us to embrace change and seek what you want for us as we look at the future. We pray for those who don't experience your love, those who worship in fear of prosecution, or those who don't have a community to rely on. We know that we are privileged. Let us take a moment for people we know who need your love, and say their names out loud or in our hearts. In God's name we pray.
Amen.